My parents told me to stop being a burden and left me on the street. When I was 13, they drove away and never looked back. Years later, my sister sent me a wedding invitation with a note from them. I'm 31 now. It's been 18 years since I last saw my parents. 18 years since they drove away from that rest stop outside of Bakersfield, leaving me standing next to a grimy bathroom with nothing but a backpack and $23 in my pocket. Let me back up. Growing up, I was always the difficult one. Madison was 2 years older, straight A's captain of the volleyball team, the daughter who never caused problems. Then there was me, Emma. I struggled with school, not because I was stupid, but because I had undiagnosed ADHD that nobody bothered to investigate. My dad said I was lazy. My mom said I just needed to apply myself. When I asked for help with homework, my father would sigh like I'd asked him to move a mountain. Figure it out yourself, he'd say. You can't expect everyone to hold your hand through life. I tried, I really did. But the harder I tried, the worse things seemed to get. By 13, I was pulling C's and D's, forgetting to turn in assignments, losing track of time. My parents' disappointment hung over the house like smoke. The summer before 8th grade, things escalated. My mom landed a big promotion at her law firm. My dad's architecture business won some prestigious contract. Madison got accepted into a competitive summer program at Stanford. And me, I failed pre-algebra and had to retake it. Do you have any idea how embarrassing this is? My mother asked at dinner one night, her voice sharp as glass. Madison's professors are asking about our family. And what am I supposed to say? That our youngest can't even pass middle school math. She's not even trying. My dad added, not looking at me. She's given up. I hadn't given up. I was drowning and nobody would throw me a rope. August 14th. That's the date I'll never forget. We were driving back from visiting my grandmother in San Francisco. Madison sat in the front seat talking about her summer program. I was in the back staring out the window, exhausted from 2 hours of listening to how accomplished my sister was. Somewhere past Kettleman City, my dad pulled into a rest stop. Said he needed coffee. My mom went to the bathroom. Madison stayed in the car, headphones on. Emma, come here. My dad called. I got out confused. He was standing by the trunk with my backpack, the one I brought on the trip. Your mother and I have been talking. He started, his voice flat and businesslike. You're 13 years old. You're old enough to understand consequences. You're old enough to start taking responsibility for yourself. What do you mean? My stomach twisted. We're tired, Emma. We're tired of the drama, the poor grades, the constant neediness. You need to grow up and stop being such a burden on this family. My mother appeared behind him, her face hard. We've given you every opportunity. We've tried everything, but you refuse to meet us halfway. I don't understand what you're saying. My voice cracked. You're old enough to figure things out on your own. My dad said he handed me my backpack. There's some money in the front pocket. Make better choices than you've been making. Dad, what? This is your wake-up call? My mom interrupted. Maybe when you realize how good you had it, you'll appreciate what you've thrown away. They walked back to the car. I stood there frozen, certain this was some cruel joke. They'd turn around. They'd laugh and say they were teaching me a lesson. They'd tell me to get back in the car. The engine started. Madison looked back at me through the rear window, her face pale. She mouthed something I couldn't make out. Then she turned around and they drove away. I stood in that parking lot for 20 minutes waiting for them to circle back. They didn't. The sun was setting. I was 70 meters from home in a city I didn't know. I had no phone. My parents had taken it 2 months earlier as punishment for a bad report card. I walked to the rest stop building and found a payphone. It ate my first quarter without connecting. The second quarter got me a dial tone, but when I called our house, nobody answered. I tried 3 more times over the next hour. Nothing. By 10 p.m., the rest stop had mostly emptied. A security guard told me I couldn't stay inside overnight. I walked around the perimeter, found a drainage ditch behind the truck parking area, and curled up in it with my backpack as a pillow. The ground was hard and smelled like oil. I could hear the highway traffic, endless and indifferent. I didn't sleep. I cried until my throat was raw, then lay there staring at the stars, trying to understand what I'd done that was so terrible. I deserved this. When the sun came up, I counted the money in my backpack. $23. I bought a granola bar and a bottle of water from the vending machines, leaving me with $19. At 8 a.m., A woman came out of an RV park nearby. Her name was Patricia, and she was maybe 50, with kind eyes and gray hair pulled into a ponytail. She saw me sitting on the curb and asked if I was okay. I told her everything. The words poured out in a messy, desperate rush. She listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker with each sentence. "Where do you live, sweetheart?" she asked. "Fresno," I said. "But I can't go home. They don't want me." Patricia's jaw tightened. "Those people aren't parents, they're criminals. What they did is called abandonment, and it's illegal." She took me to a police station in Bakersfield. I gave the officers my parents' information, explained what happened. They called my house. My mother answered. I sat in a plastic chair at the station while the officer talked to her on the phone in another room. When he came back, his face was grim. "Your mother says you ran away from the rest stop after an argument. She says they looked for you for an hour before having to leave for an important business meeting." "That's not true. I said they left me there on purpose. My dad gave me my backpack and said I needed to grow up. They drove away." The officer looked uncomfortable. "It's your word against theirs, and they're saying they want you to come home. They're very concerned. I'm not going back. You're a minor. You don't have a choice." Patricia stepped in. "I'm a licensed foster care provider in Oregon. I can take temporary custody while this gets sorted out through the proper channels." The officer looked relieved to have an option that didn't involve immediate family conflict. "We'll need to contact Child Protective Services and start the paperwork." What followed was 3 weeks of bureaucracy. CPS opened an investigation. My parents were interviewed multiple times. They stuck to their story about me running away, but the timeline didn't add up. Other travelers at the rest stop that night had seen me alone, saw my parents drive off without me. One truck driver even came forward as a witness, saying he'd noticed a young girl crying by herself for hours. The evidence was damning, but my parents hired an expensive lawyer who argued it had been a misunderstanding and poor judgment during a family crisis. They agreed to voluntary relinquishment of custody to avoid criminal charges. They signed the papers without hesitation, probably relieved to make the problem me disappear legally. Patricia went through background checks, home visits, and interviews. Her history as a social worker helped. Within a month, I was officially placed in her care as a foster child with a stipend from the state to help cover expenses. "Why would you do this for me?" I asked when the paperwork finally cleared. "You don't even know me." "Because somebody should have," she said simply, "and because I know what it's like to be thrown away." "Why would you do this for me?" I asked. "You don't even know me." "Because somebody should have," she said simply, "and because I know what it's like to be thrown away." I lived with Patricia for 5 years. She enrolled me in school, got me tested for ADHD, sat with me through therapy sessions where I unraveled years of emotional abuse I hadn't even recognized as abuse. She taught me that my worth wasn't measured by grades or achievements. She taught me that I deserved to be loved without conditions. The first year was the hardest. I'd wake up in Patricia's guest room, my room she insisted on calling it, and forget where I was. Panic would set in before I remembered I was safe. Some mornings I'd find Patricia already awake, making pancakes in her tiny kitchen, humming along to the radio. She never made a big deal out of my nightmares or the times she'd find me crying in the bathroom at 2 a.m. School in Oregon was different. The teachers actually listened when I explained I was struggling. My English teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, let me turn in audio recordings instead of written essays when my brain wouldn't cooperate with getting words on paper. My math teacher, Mrs. Chen, broke down problems into smaller steps and celebrated when I finally understood concepts that had eluded me for years. With medication and proper support, my grades climbed from D's to B's and even a few A's. Each good report card felt like evidence that I hadn't been the problem all along. The system had failed me. My parents had failed me, but I hadn't failed myself. Patricia worked part-time as a consultant for child services, so money was tight. Our apartment was small in a building that smelled like old carpet and somebody's cooking. But it was ours. She taught me how to budget, how to cook simple meals, how to do laundry without turning everything pink. Life skills my parents had never bothered with because they'd been too busy pointing out my failures. During that first Christmas, I waited for a card or a phone call that never came. Patricia found me staring at her landline on December 25th, willing it to ring. "Sweetheart," she said gently, "people who love you don't make you beg for scraps of their attention. But they're my parents. Biology doesn't make someone a parent. Love does. Action does. Being there when it's hard, that's what makes someone family. I cried into her shoulder while she held me, and something inside me began to shift. Maybe I didn't need them to come back. Maybe I just needed to grieve what I'd never really had in the first place. My parents never filed a missing persons report. They never called Patricia's number, which the police and CPS had on file. They simply erased me from their lives like I'd never existed. The court-mandated reunification attempts went nowhere. They didn't show up to scheduled meetings, didn't return social workers' calls. After 6 months, their parental rights were terminated entirely, and Patricia began adoption proceedings. Madison sent me 2 emails in those first 6 months, both to an old email address I'd given her years ago. Both said the same thing. She was sorry she missed me, but Mom and Dad wouldn't let her contact me. She must have gotten Patricia's physical address from the CPS case file somehow. Maybe she'd snooped through our parents' paperwork when they weren't looking. After those initial emails, silence for a while, but in the second year, something changed. I started getting birthday cards from her, always sent to Patricia's address, never with a return address, like she was afraid our parents would find out. The messages were short, cautious. Happy 15th birthday. Hope you're doing okay. Love, Madison. Each one felt like a small act of rebellion on her part, and I kept them in a shoebox under my bed. By the time I was 16, Patricia's health started declining. She'd been diagnosed with lupus years before, and the stress of essentially raising a teenager while working was taking its toll. I got a job at a local grocery store stocking shelves after school. It wasn't much, but it helped. More than that, it gave me purpose beyond just surviving. My coworker Jake became my first real friend. He was 17 with a mess of red hair and a laugh that could fill a room. He'd grown up in foster care, bounced between 7 homes before aging out of the system at 18. We'd sit in the break room during our shifts, sharing stories about the families that had failed us. You ever think about confronting them? He asked me once. Your parents, I mean every day, I admitted. But what would I even say? You'd tell them they messed up, that they lost something precious because they were too stupid to see what they had. I thought about that conversation for months afterward. What would I say if I ever saw them again? Would I scream? Would I cry? Would I simply walk away? Senior year of high school, I got accepted to Portland State University with a partial scholarship. Patricia threw me a party with exactly 3 people, me, her, and Jake. But it felt more genuine than any celebration my parents had ever hosted. We ate grocery store cake, and Patricia cried happy tears. I'm so proud of you, she kept saying. You've worked so hard for this. Those words meant everything. Because unlike my parents, conditional pride, hers was real. She'd seen me at my worst, sobbing over failed quizzes, having panic attacks, before tests, convinced I was stupid and worthless, and she'd never once made me feel like a burden. The summer before college, I legally changed my emergency contact information to Patricia. Filled out every form with her name, her number, her address. It felt like officially severing the last thread connecting me to Daniel and Susan Harrington. My hands shook while I signed the documents, but Patricia squeezed my shoulder. This doesn't make you a bad person, she said. This makes you someone who knows her worth. College opened up a new world. I joined a support group for students estranged from their families and discovered I wasn't alone. There was Michael, whose parents had kicked him out for being gay. There was Jasmine, whose mother's boyfriend had made home unsafe. There was David, whose father's alcoholism had turned violent. We were all walking around with these invisible wounds, learning to build lives from broken foundations. My sophomore year, I met Marcus at a volunteer orientation for a youth mentorship program. He was studying education, wanted to be a high school counselor, tall, with dark skin and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. Our first conversation lasted 3 hours, sitting on a bench outside the student union while the sun set. Why do you volunteer with kids? He asked me. Because I was one of them once, a kid who needed someone to see her really see her. And someone did. Now I want to be that person for someone else. He looked at me with something like admiration. That's the best reason I've ever heard. We started dating a month later. He was patient with my trauma, never pushed when I needed space, celebrated the small victories. The first time I told him I loved him, I immediately panicked and tried to take it back. He just laughed and kissed my forehead. Emma, you don't have to be afraid of loving people. Not everyone leaves. Proving him right became his personal mission. He showed up for every panic attack, every bad day, every moment when my past tried to drag me under. He met Patricia and instantly understood why I called her my real mother. The two of them ganged up on me with love until I started believing I deserved it. At 18, I aged out of Patricia's unofficial guardianship. She'd given me everything. Stability, love, a chance to heal. I moved to Portland for college, got my degree in social work because of her, built a life, a good life. I became a child advocate, helping kids in situations like mine. I met my fiancé Marcus at a community center where we both volunteered. I made friends, found therapy, learned to be okay. But there was always this hollow space where my family should have been. Some nights I dream about that rest stop, wake up with my heart hammering, convinced I was still lying in that ditch. Then last week, the invitation arrived. Inside was the standard wedding announcement. Madison Harrington and Brandon Chen. June 18th ceremony at 4 p.m. at some vineyard in Napa. But tucked behind the RSVP card was a handwritten note on my mother's monogram stationer. Emma Madison wanted you at her wedding. Your father and I think enough time has passed. We're willing to put the past behind us and welcome you back to the family. You're older now, hopefully more mature. We'd like to see the woman you've become. We'll be at the Oak Ridge Hotel in Napa the night before the wedding. Room 412. Come by at 7:00 p.m. so we can talk before the ceremony. It would mean a lot to your sister. Mother. I read it 5 times, feeling something cold and dark unfurl in my chest. Not once did she acknowledge what they'd done. Not once did she apologize. Just this assumption that I've been the problem, that I'd needed to grow up. And now that I presumably had, we could all play happy family again. Marcus found me standing in the kitchen, hands shaking. You okay? He asked. I showed him the note. He read it, his expression shifting from concern to anger. You're not going, he said. It wasn't a question. No, I agreed. I'm not. But I couldn't stop thinking about Madison. My sister who looked back at me through that car window with something that might have been guilt or fear or oath. Who'd sent those emails saying she missed me. Who wanted me at her wedding enough to include me despite our parents' objections. The invitation haunted me for days. I catch myself staring at it, reading between the lines of my mother's note. Hopefully more mature, as if maturity meant accepting their version of events, as if 18 years of silence could be erased with an invitation to play family for a weekend. Marcus found me one evening on our apartment balcony, the invitation clutched in my hand. Talk to me, he said, settling into the chair next to mine. I keep thinking about that night. I admit it, not the rest stop. I mean, yes, that too, but the years before. All the little moments where they showed me I wasn't enough. The way my dad would sigh when I asked for help. The way my mom would compare me to Madison at every opportunity. How they discuss my failures at dinner like I wasn't sitting right there. You were just a kid. I know that now. But part of me still wonders if I could have been better, tried harder, been less of a disappointment. Marquez took my hand. Emma, you could have been perfect, and they still would have found fault. Some people are incapable of unconditional love. That's their failure, not yours. I knew he was right. Years of therapy had taught me that, but knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally were two different things. Madison reached out. I said suddenly, she's called twice this week, left voicemails. Have you listened to them? No. I'm afraid of what she'll say. What if she's just like them? What if this whole thing is some elaborate setup to humiliate me? Do you really think she'd do that? I considered it. The Madison I remembered had been quiet, compliant, desperate for our parents' approval. But those birthday cards had kept coming for years, each one a small act of defiance. She'd risked their anger to stay connected to me, even minimally. No, I said finally. I said, I don't think she would. Then maybe you should call her back. I called the number on the invitation. Madison answered on the third ring. Emma, her voice cracked. Oh my God. Emma, is it really you? Yeah, I said. It's me. I didn't think you'd call. I didn't think you'd even open the invitation. Why did you invite me? Madison. Silence then. Because you're my sister. Because I've missed you every single day for 18 years, because what they did was unforgivable, and I've never stopped feeling guilty for not doing anything to stop it. You were 15. I was old enough to know it was wrong. I should have called the police myself. I should have refused to stay silent, but I was a coward, and I've had to live with that. Her voice broke completely. I could hear her crying, and despite everything, despite the years of abandonment, I felt something crack inside me. Are they different now? I asked. Mom and Dad, have they changed at all? No, Madison said quietly. They're exactly the same. They talk about you like you're a problem. They solved like you were some troubled teenager who needed tough love. They've rewritten history in their heads until they're the victims. Then why did you let them write that note I didn't? I didn't even know about it until 2 days ago when Mom mentioned she'd sent you a proper invitation. I was furious. I told her she had no right to speak for me, that if she wanted to contact you, she needed to apologize and actually mean it. What did she say? She said I was being dramatic, that you'd understand once you were older. I laughed, but it came out bitter. Of course she did. Emma, you don't have to come to the wedding. I want you there more than anything, but I understand if you can't. I understand if you hate me. I don't hate you, I said. And it was true. I'd spent years angry at Madison for not protecting me, for choosing the easy path, but Patricia had helped me see that Madison had been a kid too, trapped in her own way. But I need to think about this. Okay, she whispered. Okay. We hung up. Marcus was watching me from the couch. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know yet, but I did know. An idea had been forming since I'd read that note, cold and sharp and perfect. The anger I'd buried for 18 years was surfacing. But it wasn't the hot, chaotic rage of my teenage years. This was different, calculated. I'd spent nearly 2 decades helping kids navigate systems that failed them, learning how to advocate, how to use the rules to protect the vulnerable. Now those skills could serve a different purpose. I started by doing research. Social media made it easy. My father's architecture firm had a polished website with staff photos and recent projects. My mother's law firm had won several high-profile cases. They built impressive careers, cultivated reputations as respected professionals. Their LinkedIn profiles were full of recommendations and accolades. I found photos from charity galas, fundraisers, community events, always smiling, always perfectly dressed, always projecting success. In one photo from last year, they stood with Madison at some formal dinner. My sister looked uncomfortable, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. What are you doing? Marcus asked, finding me hunched over my laptop at midnight. Reconnaissance. He sat down next to me, studied the screen. Emma, whatever you're planning, they tried to erase me. I interrupted. They abandoned a 13-year-old child and then told everyone I ran away, that I was troubled, that I wanted nothing to do with them. They've been lying for 18 years and nobody's ever challenged them. So you're going to, expose them? I'm going to give them a choice. They can face consequences, or they can disappear from Madison's life the way they made me disappear from theirs. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. You're sure about this? I've never been more sure of anything. Over the next 2 days, I made calls, reached out to colleagues who specialized in family law, confirmed that what my parents had done, abandoning a minor, was indeed criminal, with no statute of limitations for that level of child endangerment in California. I wasn't planning to press charges, but they didn't need to know that. I also contacted several people from my parents' social circle. Not directly, that would have tipped them off. But I found mutual connections through Madison's social media people who'd be at the wedding. Planted seeds of curiosity with carefully worded questions about family dynamics and the younger Harrington daughter. Patricia called on Thursday. Madison contacted me. She said she wants to meet before the wedding. Emma, she's not like them. I can hear it in her voice. Did she say anything about Mom and Dad? She said they've been pressuring her to exclude you from the ceremony, that they only agreed to let her send the invitation if they could include that note. She's planning to seat you at the family table and them at a side table near the back. She's risking their raft for me because she knows what they did was wrong and because she spent 18 years watching them lie about it. That conversation solidified everything. Madison deserved to have her wedding free from their toxic presence, and our parents deserved to understand what they'd lost, what they'd thrown away. I spent the next 3 days planning, made phone calls, pulled some strings through my work connections, called in favors from colleagues. By the time Friday rolled around, everything was in place. Marcus drove with me to Napa. We checked into a hotel across town from where my parents were staying. At 6 p.m., I put on my best dress, simple professional, the kind of thing that said I turned out just fine without them. The drive to their hotel took 25 minutes through wine country traffic. I sat in the passenger seat rehearsing what I'd say, my hands clenched in my lap. Marcus kept glancing over at me. "You can still back out," he said. "We can turn around right now." "No, I need to do this." At 6:55 p.m., I walked into the Oak Ridge Hotel lobby. Marcus waited in the car ready to come get me if I texted. At 7 p.m. exactly, I knocked on the door of room 412. My father answered. He looked older, grayer, but his eyes were the same calculating cold. He stared at me for a long moment. "Emma," he said finally, "you came. You asked me to." He stepped back to let me in. The room was a suite, expensive and tastefully decorated. My mother sat on the couch, a glass of wine in her hand. She looked at me with an expression I couldn't read. "Well," she said, "look at you all grown up." I stood in the center of the room, hands clasped in front of me. "You wanted to talk." "Sit down," my father said, gesturing to a chair. "I'll stand." He frowned but didn't push it. "Your mother and I wanted to clear the air before tomorrow. Madison's wedding is important, and we don't want any drama." "Drama," I repeated. "Is that what you call what happened 18 years ago?" "Emma, we're not going to relitigate the past." My mother said, "What's done is done. You're clearly doing fine. You've made something of yourself despite your early struggles. We're proud of that." The audacity was breathtaking. "You're proud?" "Of course. It shows that our tough love approach worked. You needed a wake-up call, and you got one. Look at you now." Something inside me went very calm, very cold. "You abandoned me at a rest stop." "I was 13 years old. You were being difficult." "My father said you needed to learn responsibility. I was a child with undiagnosed ADHD who needed help. And instead of getting me that help, you threw me away like garbage." "Don't be dramatic," my mother snapped. "We knew you'd find your way home. We were teaching you a lesson. I didn't find my way home. Hey, a stranger took pity on me and lied to the police to keep me out of your custody. I never came home and you never came looking for me. Because you were with your aunt." My father said, "We were told you were fine." "Patricia wasn't my aunt. She was a retired social worker who committed fraud to save me from you. And you never once verified where I actually was. You never called. You never checked. You were just relieved to be rid of me." My mother stood up, her face flushing. "How dare you? We raised you, clothed, you fed you. We gave you every advantage. You gave Madison every advantage. You gave me criticism and contempt and then abandoned me when I became too inconvenient. This is exactly why we had to make hard choices." My father said, "This victim mentality, this refusal to take responsibility for your own failures." I was 13, old enough to know better. I took a breath, studied myself. This was the moment. "I came here tonight because I wanted to see if you changed," I said quietly. "If you'd show even the smallest amount of remorse or self-awareness, but you're exactly who you've always been. So I need to tell you something." "What?" my mother asked impatiently. "Madison didn't want you at her wedding." They stared at me. "She invited you because she felt obligated, because cutting off your parents is hard even when they deserve it. But she told me yesterday that the happiest day of her life would be marrying Brandon without you. They're judging everything, criticizing every choice, making it about yourselves." "That's not true," my father said, but his voice wavered. "It is. And here's the thing. I'm not coming to the wedding tomorrow, but I am speaking at the rehearsal dinner tonight. In about 20 minutes, actually. Madison asked me to give a speech about family, about what it means to be there for the people you love. Want to guess what I'm going to talk about?" My mother's face went pale. "You wouldn't. I'm going to tell every single person in that room what you did. The lawyers, the business partners, the Stanford professors, the society friends you care so much about impressing. I'm going to tell them how you abandoned your 13-year-old daughter at a rest stop and never looked back. I'm going to tell them that I slept in a ditch that night. Emma, wait. And then tomorrow during the reception, I'm going to introduce them to Patricia. The woman who actually raised me, who actually loved me, who's more of a mother than you ever were. She's flying in tonight. Madison's already met her via video chat. She's sitting at the family table. Your seat got moved. You can't do this." My father said, his voice hard. I already have. The speech is written. The guests are gathering. And if you try to stop me, I'll make it worse. I'll make sure every newspaper in the Bay Area knows what kind of people you really are. This is blackmail, my mother hissed. No, this is consequences. You taught me about those. Remember, I pulled out a piece of paper from my purse, unfolded it. But I'm not completely heartless. You have two options. Option one, you stay in this hotel room tonight and tomorrow. You send Madison a text saying you're not feeling well. You missed the wedding. In exchange, I give a generic speech about love and support that doesn't mention you at all. You fade into the background of her life, like you did with mine. Or, my father asked through gritted teeth. Option two, you come to the rehearsal dinner in the wedding. You watch me tell everyone who will listen what you really are. You watch your reputations crumble. You watch people whisper and stare. And you deal with the fact that your daughter chose a stranger over you because that stranger showed me more love in 5 years than you showed me in 13. The silence was deafening. My mother's hands were shaking. My father's face had gone red. You've become vindictive, he said finally. No, I've become strong. No, there's a difference. Were your parents? You were the people who were supposed to be my parents, but you gave up that right when you left me in that ditch. I walked to the door, paused with my hand on the knob. You have until 7:30 to decide. After that, I'm walking into that rehearsal dinner, and there's no taking back what happens next. I walked back to my car where Marcus was waiting. My hands were trembling. How did it go, he asked. Exactly how it needed to. We drove to the vineyard where the rehearsal dinner was being held, a 15-minute drive from their hotel. Madison met me at the entrance at 7:40, threw her arms around me, held on tight. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being brave enough to do this. They're not going to show up, I said. Good. I don't want them here. I just wanted you. At 7:55, I stood up to give my speech. The guests were a mix of Madison's friends, Brandon's family colleagues, and extended relatives. My parents' seats at the head table were conspicuously empty. I talked about family, about the people who choose to love you, who show up when things are hard, who proved through actions that you matter. I talked about Patricia, who saved my life without hesitation. I talked about Marcus, who taught me what partnership really meant. I talked about Madison, who'd had the courage to reach out despite years of silence. I didn't mention my parents by name, but I told the story of a 13-year-old girl left at a rest stop, sleeping in a ditch, being saved by a stranger's kindness. I talked about how sometimes the family you build is stronger than the family you're born into. When I finished, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. People stood and applauded. Madison was crying, her fiancé's arm around her shoulders. An older woman approached me afterward, one of my mother's longtime friends. Susan and Daniel aren't here, she said carefully. Did something happen? They weren't feeling well. I said last-minute thing. She studied my face. You're the daughter. The younger one. They said you ran away years ago, got mixed up with drugs, wanted nothing to do with the family. That's not what happened. I gathered that from your speech. She paused. I'm glad you're here. I'm glad Madison had someone who loved her the right way. Several other guests approached throughout the evening. Some had heard whispers over the years, inconsistencies in my parents' stories. Others were simply moved by the speech and wanted to express their support. Each conversation felt like another brick being removed from the wall of lies my parents had built. Brandon's mother, Helen, pulled me aside before dessert was served. She was a warm woman with silver hair and laugh lines around her eyes. Madison told me what your parents did, she said quietly. What they really did, not the story they've been telling. I just want you to know that your family, now Brandon's family, which makes you my family. If you ever need anything at all, you call me. The kindness from these strangers, people who had no obligation to me, was overwhelming. I'd spent so long believing that something was fundamentally wrong with me, that I was unlovable. But here were dozens of people moved by my story, offering support and acceptance without conditions. Later that night, back at the hotel, Marcus held me while I processed everything. You gave them an out, he said. They could have stayed away quietly, but instead they're probably spinning this to anyone who will listen. Let them, I said. The people who matter know the truth now. Madison knows. Patricia knows. You know, everyone at that dinner knows. Their reputation among the people they care about, most impressing. That's been damaged, whether they realize it yet or not. Do you think they'll try to contact Madison? Probably they'll try to control the narrative, make themselves the victims. But Madison's ready for it. She's been ready for years. The wedding the next day was beautiful. Patricia flew in that morning, met Madison properly, cry happy tears. She sat next to me during the ceremony. My parents never showed. Madison looked radiant in her dress, standing next to Brandon with genuine joy on her face. During the vows, when Brandon promised to be her partner through everything to support her unconditionally, I saw her glance back at me. We locked eyes and she smiled a real smile, free and unburdened. The reception was held in a garden behind the vineyard, strings of lights hanging between old oak trees. I danced with Marcus, with Patricia, and finally with Madison during the sister dance she'd specifically requested. "Thank you," she whispered as we swayed to the music. "Thank you for coming back. Thank you for being strong enough to stand up to them. I couldn't have done this without knowing you were here. You would have been fine," I assured her. "Maybe, but I don't want to just be fine anymore. I want to be free like you are." After the dance, Patricia found me sitting at our table watching the celebration. "You did good, kiddo," she said, using her old nickname for me. "I just told the truth. Sometimes that's the bravest thing you can do." She squeezed my hand. "Your parents spent 18 years trying to make you invisible. But look at you now, standing in the light, surrounded by people who love you. That's not revenge. That's victory." 3 days later, Madison called me. They're furious. She said, "Mom's been calling me nonstop saying you blackmailed them, that you're trying to destroy the family." What did you tell her? I told her the only person who destroyed this family was her. Then I blocked both of their numbers. Brandon and I are moving to Seattle next month for his job. Fresh start away from them. Good. Emma, will you visit us once we're settled? Yeah, I said. I'd like that. We talk every week now. She's met Patricia several times. Calls her Aunt Patricia like I do. She's in therapy working through her own guilt and trauma. She told me she wishes she'd been brave enough to leave with me that day, but she'd been too scared. I understand that fear now. Leaving is hard. Surviving after leaving is harder. As for my parents, I never heard from them directly. But I heard through Madison that they spun a story to their friends about me being mentally unstable, about having to make the difficult choice to distance themselves for their own well-being. Some people believed them, some people didn't. I don't care anymore. Their opinions, their approval, their version of events, none of it touches me now. I have Marcus. I have Patricia. I have Madison rebuilding a relationship with me on new, honest terms. I have a job I love, helping kids who need advocates. Last month, I got a letter from my mother. No return address, but I recognized the handwriting. I didn't open it. I threw it away without reading a single word. Marcus asked me later if I was curious about what it said. No, I told him honestly. Whatever it says, it's 18 years too late. Some people think I should forgive them. That holding on to anger isn't healthy. That I should be the bigger person. But forgiveness isn't something you owe people who hurt you. And I'm not angry anymore. I'm just done. I'm done carrying the weight of their expectations, their cruelty, their inability to love me. I'm done wondering what I could have done differently to make them want me. I'm done letting them take up any space in my heart. They left me in a ditch when I was 13, and I clawed my way out of it. I survived. I built something beautiful from the wreckage they left behind, and I did it without them. That's not revenge. That's just living well. Sometimes I still dream about that rest stop. But now when I wake up, I'm in a home I built next to a man who chose me, with people in my life who prove every day that I was always worth loving. I don't need my parents to acknowledge what they did. I don't need them to apologize. I don't need anything from them at all. I already have everything I ever need.